It's a massive pleasure for me to be here. Like when I got involved with software craftsmanship, I was not there in the first meeting in Chicago in 2008, but I got involved quite early on. And I never ever imagined that almost 10 years later we would be here, like talking about software craftsmanship. And never in a billion years I would imagine like how many communities were created and how much we've done in the software craftsmanship movement. So it's a very special date for me. And I think that for the whole software craftsmanship as well. So there's no way in hell that I will be able to say everything I need to say in 45 minutes. So I'm going to go straight to it. So bias. An inclination or prejudice for or against someone or something in a way that is considered unfair. So why is that relevant to this talk? It's because when you talk about software design, we all have software design biases. And project after project, the same way that we do with a programming language, right? So you take one language that you know enough, and like take Java, for example, and then you build one system in Java, and then another one, and another one. And the more things that you do with Java or other language, the more proficient you become, the more comfortable you become, and you end up, one way or another, solving all your problems with that language. And I realized that design is the same. So we can also pick one design style and start solving different problems with that design style. If it's the best fit for the problems that you are solving, it's a different matter, but it's possible. So I don't have a comprehensive list of design biases. That's not what this talk is about, but I can just give you an idea of some of those things. So for example, I call them styles, right? So there is a procedural, there is a data, object, functional, service, and event. So they are very different from each other, right? So we can solve almost any system using them, but the way that you go about building a system with them looks fairly different. So the procedure normally goes sequential, and then you may reuse a few routines here and there, but you focus on the flow, normally one thing after another. So there's not a lot of modeling or domain modeling in procedural. The data approach is quite different. Like we say, like, you know what? I'll first make analyze how the data looks like, and go through a few features, try to understand the relationship that the data has, and that may kind of help you to create some database or some entities and stuff. And then you end up putting the behavior on the side, so the data becomes stays at the center of your design. So the object, for example, you have nouns, and then all of a sudden start plugging the verbs into it, and then they have send message to each other. You start modeling a few concepts. So there's no right or wrong on those things. They're just fairly different. And the functional, you also decompose and use composition to compose more complex things. We have this aversion of side effects and stuff like that, so you try to isolate. The service has an interesting one. It's more focused on the behavior, so there's not a lot of entities, so that the behavior is at the core. So an event. So all those things, you can solve a lot of things with these styles. The impact that they have in your solution varies immensely. So if you have a single app and it's quite large, then it's a high impact. Because for those things to be maintainable, there is a level of understandability, if that's a word. So you need to know those concepts in order to maintain a system that is written in these paradigms. If you break your application to smaller parts, they become a little bit less relevant, because you can think they will be smaller anyway. But there are a few other ones. So for example, there are operational architectural biases as well. So some people are paranoid with performance, even if they don't know what the SLAs are. They would just say, no, performance is a must. And they would try to optimize performance at all levels. And then some people like architectural styles and CQRS and event sourcing and microservices and stuff. And you can clearly see when you look at the system the influences of architectural or operational biases in there, mainly because they are quite entangled with the domain model. So, but those are common biases, right? So the styles one or these ones. there is one particular type of design bias. That's the one that I want to talk today. It's kind of orthogonal to some of those concepts. And not always we talk about that, but this is the actual direction that we use to design software. As I said, it's orthogonal to the style that you're using. For example, you might choose to start from, if you had like the three-tier kind of stuff, like user interface, application, and persistence, right? So what you may start from the persistence or for the data, and then you come in from that side to the application logic and then to the UI. So that is a direction that you design. You might not implement this way, but you design this way. This has an impact, right? So, and then there is what we call the inside out. So a lot of, many of us, and I've done certainly that for many years, we would go to the core domain first. That's the first thing, core domain. Let's explore the business rules. And we don't care too much about, at that moment where we are designing, we don't care too much about the persistence or the user interface or maybe other systems that we connect to. So the domain model becomes the focus of your system. And everything else, like the sideways, like are the details, the UI or the persistence. So, and then I distinguish the two. Like there is the user interface, probably is a very bad name. So I need to think about a better name. But basically, like you come from outside. For example, I've seen quite a lot where people will draw a lot of wireframes and stuff like that and think about the usability and the journeys and stuff, and they will start from there. So they will send that to the developers, and then we start implementing those things. From the user interface to the application logic to the persistence. One thing that I struggle with some of those items or styles is to work incrementally. It's very difficult sometimes to know how much you design and when. And then we all learn that it would be great to work incrementally. And we talk about vertical slices. But how do you slice coming from the database? How do you slice if you are in the middle of the domain model, not knowing how that thing that you are exploring is going to be delivered? So it's not an easy way to find those slices. Also, what I find is that when we go to the domain model, and when we are exploring, we are unbounded. So there's no constraints. We are exploring a domain, we're exploring data, but because we don't know exactly what we are providing to the external world, we don't know exactly where to stop or how much we should understand that. There is a style that I like, I call outside in. And I put incremental just to distinguish with the other one. That is similar to the UI. It's coming from outside. But we first analyze, so if we are building a system, why are we building that? So there is someone outside, an actor that we call, either a user, real human user, or other systems that they want something from this system. And this is an interesting perspective for you to start designing, because this system should only exist to satisfy the needs of the external world. Otherwise, if no one from the external world is using your system, there's no point for the system to exist. So, and this allows us, coming from this perspective, to start understanding the potential vertical slices that you might have. So, there are different design techniques. As I said, there's no right or wrong. I'm not here to say like this is right or this is wrong. I'm saying that there are styles that you can use and combine. And each one of those styles might give you a different perspective of your system, right? So, and you have like, for example, an internal and external perspective. So when you look at this, for example, if I look at the insider's perspective, this is what we normally do. We go to our domain model, domain-driven design and things like that. We think about hexagons. Normally, like for people that like hexagonal architecture, is what goes inside. And so this insider's perspective is very important, right? It allows us to play with the domain logic. We say, okay, there are these rules in here, and then we go back to our product owners, but what if this happens and that happened and that happened? So this gives you a perspective. It's quite easy for some to explore state machines or flows and stuff, but like it's unbounded, as I said. So I remember there is a kata called bank kata, where you need to do 3 operations. So you need to provide a piece of code that provides a deposit feature, a withdrawal feature, and a print statement feature. It's fascinating to see how people using different design perspectives will implement that. People that will focus on the domain first, as soon as they think, well, I need a deposit, what is the side effect of deposit? I need to update my what is it called? My balance, thank you. So I need to update my balance. Because this totally makes sense. If you are making a deposit or a withdrawal, of course your balance should be updated. Domain-wise, that's totally makes sense. However, when you look at the features that you are providing to the external world, there's not a single feature that needs the actual balance. What you need when you do a deposit and a withdrawal, you need to record a transaction so that when you have the statement, you can just print the transactions that has a calculated or a running balance. But this is the problem when you just have one perspective. You don't know what the boundaries are. You can keep evolving that domain with no constraints. And you end up doing things that you probably don't need. But it gives you a good perspective. So, and then there is this outside perspective as well, which is also important. Although all of them are important, I believe that some of them are more important than others. Because like, if I think about the only reason that my domain model exists is because someone is consuming. So not taking that into account early on might cause a lot of rework, right? And what I see more and more is this. We got so fixated in our domain model. We explored so much, and we took so much care of it and had so many discussions. Then as soon as we actually start plugging in or providing those features to the external world, there is a mismatch. What the external world really wants is not exactly what you created. But we are so protective of that domain model because it totally makes sense. And we start creating those layers and layers of adapters. And I think that's where accidental complexity comes into play. So this led me to think a few things. How many of you are working with, like, are in a situation where you have a monolith and you are migrating some things to microservices? Quite a lot of people. So we talk over over-engineering as if that was a very bad thing, right? So over-engineer is bad. We don't want you over-engineer. But are we really over-engineering or under-engineering? Because everyone that is working in a monolith, so let's say that this is our bigger application, right? So, and we might have like 1 or 2 small apps, but this is the big one. And we are working feature after feature, and we are adding those features into here. And then this gets complicated, and then we refactor and rearrange, and also. But now this got very, very complex, and now we are stepping on each other's toes and things like that. So what we normally have in situations like that, if you think about a monolith is an application with an over-engineering or over-engineered micro and macro design, but a completely under-engineered architecture. Are you following me? So you have a very complex application that you think that is over-engineered. But in the great scheme of things, it's an under-engineered application. It's an under-engineered solution. And the reason that we want to break this monolith apart, like Bob was saying this morning, and Simon also touched on that, we want people to work in parallel. We want things to deploy things without breaking the other. So breaking this thing apart is important. Allows us to work more well, in parallel in safeties, like we just change one place, you don't break others and stuff. So, but we cannot achieve that because our solution was not over-engineered, it's under-engineered. So the problem is, if we try to balance that, so if we try to balance, so how can I focus on my architecture without over-engineering the solution? Because we learned a thing with Agile mainly, simplest thing could possibly work. You ain't gonna need it. all those things, they moved the tip of the scale to the other side, because in the 90s, we were over-engineering everything. And then all of a sudden say, like, you need to be careful. Just focus on the simplest thing could possibly work. The problem with that is that this mindset ends up moving us towards a application that we are incrementally making it more and more complicated, but we don't have the hooks to make the solution simpler, because we're always focused on the next feature. And we lose sight of the overall thing. So what makes it interesting now is that we focus on the hexagon architecture in our domain model. But where we are going now with our solutions is a more distributed solution. Right? If you are talking about a small team of 5, you might not need a lot of things. If you're talking about hundreds of people, certain techniques won't work. But most of us are somewhere in between. We have a few teams working in different features of the same product. And so our applications now are being split. So now we don't have a single hexagon anymore. We have quite a few, because you have different services. So my theory is that our domain model, or what our notion of domain model, needs to go way beyond a single hexagon, because now we have many. As soon as you want to split all your services, now you have your domain fragmented. So all of those things are now a part of the domain. So we need to move that level up. The problem, the challenge in here, if you try to move the concept of domain model a few levels up, how do you balance the simplest thing could possibly work and an over-engineered architecture? This is what the dichotomy is, the problem that we have, right? If you just focus this straight away, we might kill ourselves, right? So what is the balance? So how can we find this middle ground where I will still deliver value fast, but I won't work in a reactive way that will impede me to make progress, because I will create something very coupled and complex, but I also will not over-engineer. So when I was thinking about that, I started looking at reasons why this is so difficult to find this, what I call inflection point. How much do I design and when? This led me to think about the intersection between product design and software design. In Agile, we have an illusion that we developers or development teams are actually working in a close collaboration with the business. But that's not true for the vast majority of people. There are some true XP teams that are working very, very close, where developers are part of the product design as well, but they are not so common. So the problem is that the intersection between product design and software design is just a few stories at the top of our backlog. So we as development team, we go to the business or to the product owner and say, hey, what is the next story? Or what are the top 3 stories so we can just refine them? The problem with that is that there's tons of stuff that happens in product design that is completely hidden from us, and we are not very interested in that. And there's tons of stuff that we do here in terms of architecting and designing our systems that's completely hidden from the business. And this small intersection doesn't allow us to be strategic in architecture. So the smaller the intersection is between the two, the more reactive you are with your architecture. Because if my view of the future is just a few stories ahead, how can I be strategic with my architecture? I can only be reactive. I do the simplest thing could possibly work, and then I figure out what happens. Then I look at this, okay, now I have a mess, and then I will be reactive with my architecture change. So how can we help? So how can we try to solve that? Well, clearly we need to make this intersection much larger. Just looking at the 3 next top stories is not enough. So what can we do? And this is where I think that outside-in design comes in. Again, this is not the only thing. There are many other things. This is just one thing. I don't want to prescribe this is the magical one, because that doesn't exist. So, but I think that what we need to do is to look at our systems from outside, but get closer to product design. And when I say outside, I'm talking about outside the business, really, outside the building, right? So really, really from outside. So so if we look at our products from outside our company, gives us a very different perspective, and you can understand that there are many different levels. For example, there are the people outside the company that are using this product, but there are many layers in there. So there are functional areas within the company that are interacting with this system that you are building. It's not only end users that will interact with your products. There are loads of people in the back office or other companies that are also interacting with your solution. And then that's the actual solution is a little bit more complicated than just a single box. So you have your full ecosystem of systems, and then you have a single system, and then you have a bunch of classes. So there are layers of abstractions, if you like, that you can start understanding. So if you want to build something new, a new milestone, where would we start? It can be a new system or just a new milestone on an existing system. So what I'm going to show to you is just a few practices, right? So it's not a methodology. It's just a few practices among quite a few that we use that help us to get business understanding way before we have a user story, but that helps us shape our architecture. So there are a few workshops that you can do with your business. They are techniques that helps you with product design and business prioritization as well. And if we learn how to do them, if we get involved in those activities with the business, we will start being more strategic with our architecture earlier on, because we are involved way before there are 3 stories at the top of a backlog. So for example, product box is one of the many techniques out there for you to get to a notion of vision for a product. So what I'm going to show to you, we have some of our clients are here in the audience, and they probably will recognize. So some of these things that we've actually done with clients. We changed a few things just to make it simpler. Let me just say, so for example, if I go back here, I would like to start in the functional areas. So as soon as I have a vision of the system, a high-level vision, so how can I identify these functional areas? So one thing that you can do is called product box. So this technique is a very simple technique. Can be done in like a couple of hours. You bring a few stakeholders into a meeting and say, look, if you were building this system and we wanted to white label it, we want to build this system for someone else, for another company to buy and use, how would you announce it? If you want to put in a box, I know that shows how old I am. Like burn a CD, put in a box, and put in a shelf. I know it sounds terrible, doesn't it? So what would you announce? When you look at this box, this summary, this product does that. What are those main features? So different techniques will lead you to business goals or business outcomes or things like that. So fascinating that when you involve people from the same organization, and they can be CEOs, CTOs, marketing, sales, and blah, blah, it will be it's amazing to see that they will take like 2 or 3 hours to agree in this list, because they themselves see the world in a very different way. So they see their products in different perspectives, and come up with a cohesive list where everyone agrees is already quite a challenge. But this helps us this is the first pass, the first architectural pass for us to start understanding the solution context, the architectural solution context. For example, I can extract from that list some information. Like for example, well, if they want omni-channel, maybe a basket thing is an important thing, because I can add things in my basket on my phone, and then I go to the shop, it's in there, or on the web. So, and then some of them are direct match, others no. But like for example, we have catalog, or warehouse, and product, and supplier. And so this gives you, in 2 or 3 hours, an understanding of the landscape of this product, the different functional areas that you might have. And this is just the first pass. That's the bird's eye view. So what you can do after that, I'll speed up because I have a lot of things to show. Once you have this understanding, the product box, one of the things that I like about the product box, I think that what's important in here is like, this view helps us to create a portfolio level backlog. Like when you are working with a little bit larger product companies, they might have different teams, different product owners looking after different areas. So these kind of things, these kind of features in here helps us to understand the different areas. This might lead to different portfolio management, so there will be features under each one of those things. The fascinating thing about that is that if you understand this, how cool would it be if our architecture, our technical solution, started having a connection to the actual portfolio management, to the areas that the business sees? Because as soon as different product owners that are looking at different areas, if our architecture could reflect that, the chances for us not to be blocked or be able to work in parallel, they increase massively. So we can be more strategic in how we start talking about architecture. So, but let's go one level down. So at that point, we understand different areas. And then we need to have a conversation. OK, so we don't have 10 years. We might just have 3 months. So what would be our next priority? So this is, all of this stuff quite often is hidden from us developers. But the product owners or the business people, they will need to figure it out. It's like what we want to achieve in the next month or the next 3 months. So the next milestone. So how do they do that? Well, God knows, they do it in many different ways. But how can we help them to do that and understand? So there are many different techniques. Again, I'll just mention one that we use more often. That's called impact mapping from Gojko Adzik. So basically, this technique helps us a lot in terms of figure out what we need to do next, what we want to achieve. According to this information, we can decide which teams are going to work on that. We can start thinking about a lower level architecture as well, because now it's more focused in a single area. So how does impact map work? So normally you set a goal, a business goal, or a business outcome that we call. So this is just to agree on that. Like running a workshop with business people, for them to agree on a single goal is fascinating. Absolutely, because each one has a different goal, and each one thinks that their goal is more important. So, but anyway, so facilitation skills are certainly needed in here. So once they agree on the goal, then the next level is like, who could contribute to this goal or even impede us to achieve this goal? And then, what is the behavior? What is the impact that we want these people or companies to have that would enable that goal? And then, what do we actually need to do technically to enable that behavior for these actors to enable the goal? So this is a very cool technique. I'm going to show you a real example. This is a startup that was our client a long time ago. They don't exist anymore, so it's not my fault. I gave them the goals. If they could not implement, it's not my fault, right? But one of the things, like, after a long meeting, like Mesh and I were in this meeting, actually. It was a full-day meeting, actually 2-day meeting. So we narrowed down, forget about as soon as they start talking about millions of users, it doesn't matter if it's 14, if it's 5, I didn't care. So yeah, it's a bunch of users. So you want to achieve that, and the reason that they wanted to achieve that, I lost my monitor there. So, because I have no idea how much time I have. It's coming back? So, well, anyway, so they wanted to because they were in the initial stages, they want to get more users, and this has user acquisition and user retention. So getting more traction with their product would allow them to go for further rounds of investment and things like that. So then we set this goal, right? So 14, so whatever, right? So bunch of users. And then they list, like, what are the actual actors that would enable this. They were, just to give context, they were a social network in the music industry. So they wanted to have people discussing music in their application. So there were 2 main types of users I'm going to focus on. So one is the fun, the people that like the music and stuff, and the other ones are the artists. So we discussed a lot. And so like, OK, so we want to achieve this. So there are 2 things, user acquisition, user retention. As soon as users come in, they need to stay. So you have to balance that. And then you start saying, OK, so users could listen to music, so that is retention. So they are in the platform. They could sign up. Well, they need to sign up to join the platform. They can refer friends. Referring friends is about user acquisition, right? So posting content, sharing content, that's part of interacting with the platform. So that's user retention. So on and so forth. But they also had artists, so they were closing deals with very famous artists, and those artists have millions of followers in different social networks. So the interesting thing about running an exercise like that is that when you set a goal with all these people, now we can have a very sensible conversation of among all those different behaviors for different users, which one of them will contribute more to this goal? So for example, signing up with like a very famous artist that would go to Twitter or God knows where and say, hey, I have this new content that is only available in this new platform, would attract far more new people to the platform than any other feature. So this is a feature that needs to be prioritized. However, when all those people come in, they need to have something to do. And this is where being part of this discussion, or even facilitating this discussion, enables us to have a wider view of the problem. And then, all of a sudden, once those things are chosen, we need to start putting everything that we need to do to start enabling. So software-wise, how we're going to enable that behavior. What is fascinating about doing this is we have a way to prioritize features, we have a way to group features, and we have an overall view of the product. So once we have that, it's too big. And so like, OK, so if we have all these features that we need to build, now this is huge. Can we bucket them? Can we put them together? Can we group them? And as soon as you need to group them, you need to have a name for these groups. And this is where some magic happens with impact mapping when you start mapping the functional areas. Because you can now go to that side that was defined by the business in terms of priorities, the grouping of the features, the name that was given to the groups are candidates for bounded contexts. They are candidates for functional areas. So this is an essential information, because as soon as you start working in one of those features, you now have a context, a bounded a context map of your bounded context. So say, OK, so if I'm going to start this feature, maybe we could create a new service for this feature, because it's coming from the business. You can see that relation. So this allows us to be far more strategic in our architectural decisions instead of reactive, and finding this middle ground. So then we can go one level down. So at this point, we are still talking about functional areas. We're still having, this is our first guess of maybe we could have these functional areas, this bounded context, and if we get features in those areas, maybe we could start them separate. But it's still not enough. It's still high level. We still need to pick a user story. We're still a bit far away from it. So at that point, we can prioritize the features. Once we prioritize the feature, then we go one level down and say, OK, for these features that you prioritize, how would they work? So if they are triggered from outside, so if the user will come in and trigger this feature, what's going to happen? What's going to be the path through our system? So we call it functional mapping, but it's still not a great name. So I'll give you a concrete example that some of people in the audience might recognize, because they were in the workshop. So this is an e-commerce company that sells stuff online all over the world. So basically, the workshop that we were doing is like, we said, like, OK, let's explore what happens when the user comes in. The user comes into your website. What do they see first? Well, they see a catalog of products. The word catalog already. OK, so there is a catalog thing. So great. So this is where it gets very interesting. And this is when you come from outside. As I said, it's a different perspective, because you say, like, great. So the users come into the browser, and they will see a list of products. And that is your catalog. But why did you use catalog and not products? Oh, because like we have a big range of products, but we divide them in catalogs for different countries, different seasons, and stuff like that. Oh, so there is a filtering thing. So the catalog, so where the catalog gets the products from? Well, there is a much wider list of products that we need. So, but why products and catalogs are not the same thing? Because then you start discovering. So as soon as you start asking those questions, you realize that, for example, there is a full department that will make agreements with factories all over the world that will produce those items. And they input the products in the system. But they are not the same group of people that will create a sub-selection of it and create a catalog for different countries. So once you understand, now all of a sudden you started with a single user coming from outside that is buying the products to internal users that will do different things. And we already discovered two. And then you say, wow, OK, so when I get the product, what else do we show in the browser? Or what else do we show? We also show their availability. Oh, great. So availability could be part of product. Oh, no, it's not as simple like that. Because in our business, we have some warehouses that satisfy multiple countries, but you have multiple countries that have multiple, one country has multiple warehouses. So defining availability is a very complicated thing. And there is a different set of people that are related to that. So, oh, maybe that's a separate thing then. And then it's like, what about pricing? Well, pricing, we have loads of problems with price, because the same product can be sold at different prices in different parts of the world. And we need to update the prices and stuff, and the people doing the pricing are not the people doing the catalog. So there's a different set of users in there. So then you start talking about data ownership. Who owns the data? Who changes data? Who consumes data? And it would be a bad idea to start conflating the two. So this view of the system and start asking those questions. So tax is country related. Media, for example, so well, media clearly is part of the product. No, it's not. It's a separate department. We also think about the photos and the videos, because I came to know that so even with the same dress, for example, the way that the model will wear it, or the colors that they wear, may not be so well seen in certain countries. So they need different photos, different imagery, and everything else. And it's a different people that do that. So just asking and following a sequence diagram at this level, we discovered a bunch of actors in the back office that you need to interact with this data. And as soon as we pick this feature, we can be more strategic in how we're going to start deciding our architecture. So once I go and I add a product to my cart, for example, what happens? So, well, just add to the cart, great. But you told me about promotions, so how does that work? So this sounds a very silly question. So when we're talking about promotions, we had 2 clients and they were similar businesses. And they dealt with that in a completely different way. For example, if you add products to your cart, but there was a promotion. So you added a few items, and they were on sale, but you didn't buy them. And then the sale was over. They're still on a shopping basket. And then you try to actually pay for them after. What do? Would the business keep the promise that when you added, you had the discount, so it will keep the discount even after the sales? Or it will say, like, look, you know what? Things changed. You didn't buy it. Your problem. That's a new price. This is a business decision, but this business decision changed our architecture. Because if I need to keep the promotion, the sales pricing, I need to add that to my cart. Otherwise, I can just consult if the whatever I have in my cart is on sales or not. So it changed the direction of those relationships. And this is a fascinating thing to discover, just focusing on a simple flow. So, and I can go on forever in here. So I can navigate to the cart, what happens, right? So availability and delivery. Delivery is very complicated. Different countries, you have different deliveries. They need to have deals with local companies to actually deliver the thing to your door. So when you say like delivery options, it will vary immensely according to the kind of contracts that you have in each country or where you live. And that's a completely separate group of people that will deal with that. So you probably need to isolate that as well. So there are more things. So for example, I was going, for example, browser service or functional areas. But if I want to navigate to the checkout page, what do I need to see? I need to see the cart, I need to see the review options and payment methods and customer. This is an important discussion to have. How do you want to architect that? Do you want to go from the page to a single service? This service will navigate throughout your system, gather all this information, and return? Or you're going to have your page doing multiple agile AJAX calls and then display this information? Because this changes if the services are public or are private. So this is a very important decision to make, and you can explore in this. So once you have this mapping, so you can take a business area and explore different scenarios that are related, you can start mapping your service, or what we call functional areas. Like there are first level, normally they are the public ones, and there are private ones. And then you can start looking at the coupling and cohesion that they have. Do you have a fan out, like one service is talking to multiple ones? So to respond to one request, do I need to talk to many services? How that impact my performance and things like that? So this is a fun, and you can do that in a few hours, in a few days. And these kind of workshops will make you be more strategic with your architectural decisions instead of reactive. We just need to be curious and want to be more involved with the business. So a level down, if you want to go, because now I'm talking at very high level, functional areas, flows going to different parts of my system, but I still need to get down to the nitty-gritty, to the pages, the APIs, and how do I go there? There are other techniques that you can use. For example, we can start talking about mockups, for example. So this is Bob, Bob at the back. So Bob and I recorded like a series of videos on TDD and stuff, and we were implementing a Twitter-like application. So we created the front end, but how did we do this? For example, what you can do to define what you want, you can have a mockup and say, hey, would it be nice if we had a login page or a registration page? Yes. OK, so what are the interactions? So as soon as I click a button or a link, there is an interaction from the user, from outside to the system. So once you define the journey, you can go to each one of those buttons, each one of those links, and say, what would be the API? So which kind of data that I need to submit? And which kind of data do I need to receive back in order to move? So for example, if I'm doing registration, that could be it. And as soon as I click on registration, so what should I see? Well, if it's a Twitter-like app, so it will be empty, but I want to post a tweet. So if I want to post, what kind of stuff am I sending? What should I get back? Right? So if I go to my timeline, what do I want to see? Oh, I want to see this data. So what is the API for that? How much data do I bring from the API so that I can display? What are the error codes and stuff? So you can take your user journey that can be done in a few hours. Like you can have a full user journey, and then decide which slice you're going to do. And then you go for each one of those clicks and start talking about the data that's going to go in and out. And you can map that to backend services as well. So all of those things are things that we don't do. And we talk about software design and architecture with no grounds whatsoever, because we're only focused on the next user story. And this is very cheap to do. And it'll give us a much broader picture of the whole solution. I have 2 minutes left, so I'm almost. Once you have that exploration, for example, you can just create your documentation and stuff in Swagger, and you can do all of that, right? So there is at this point, going through this flow, we use techniques that are very cheap to use to explore a very big problem. We took a product vision, different features, and then we chose what we're going to do next. So we came down to an impact mapping and said, OK, so now that I have a broader view of the product, what should I do in the next 3 months? What is my next milestone? You can put an impact map in there. OK, let's explore that milestone. And then once you have that, then I said, well, let's take some of those scenarios that we broke that apart. Let's see how it maps. What kind of functional areas? If I start asking questions, would I discover different actors, internal actors, and also data ownership of things? So once I have that, well, let's go to the nitty-gritty details now. And I can validate that throughout with the business. The beauty of these approaches is that the whole language that is used, this is done with product owners and technical architects and developers in general, but this is all purely business language. So you have ubiquitous language throughout the process, throughout. And once you are down to the actual APIs, that's only then that you're going to get your TDD. Because now I'm ready. I have all the information needed. I have a direction, an architectural direction in my head. I know where I'm going to put this code. I know what the impacts will have. And then I can start test driving in a more strategic way my code, so I don't end up with a monolith that will be very difficult to refactor later. But I also have enough information not to over-engineer my whole solution. So I'm not claiming that we can reach this inflection point that I said, this middle ground. But this will reduce the chances for us to either under-engineer or over-engineer. It helps us to be somewhere in a more strategic position. And then you can start doing your, in this case, because we came from this angle, from the outside, at this point it almost doesn't matter. Like, so some of us like the classicity, starting from the inside and moving outside, and then you can focus on your, in that service or in that functional area, you can focus on your hexagon, you can go inside out. I would rather, because I'm already here, I know exactly which API I need to provide, I would just do that slide a slice outside into the D. For me, it would be much easier to do because I have everything I need. But if you're still not comfortable doing inside out, do classicists. At this point, is less relevant. I probably won't go, my time is up, so I won't go into this. To finish up, like, what is the frequency that you would do? Again, don't get caught up on the techniques themselves, the product box, impact mapping. There are many other ones out there that you can use instead and get the important thing is like, at which information do I need, at which level? And then you can pick your practices and tools. So for example, product box or product vision, you can do every 6 months, every 12 months. It varies. I don't like numbers, but just to give you an idea. So every 6 months is important to say, like, are we going to the same direction? An impact mapping, every new milestone. Everything that you have something important, every 3 months, 2 months, 4 months, do an impact mapping, that's a new milestone. And figure out what the most important features will contribute to the goal of the milestone. Once you know what the most important features are, you can explore the features using functional mapping. Just to explore the functional areas you might have, and then you might have mock-ups, you can do more regular, and then TDD is a daily base. So to build your application, that's what you do every day. So where do we go from here? So for me, this intersection needs to be bigger. The only way that we can be more strategic with our architecture, instead of being reactive with architecture, is if we have a much bigger intersection between product design and software design. We are working on something like that. We are trying, this is a work in progress. Like, we're going to be publishing more things. Like, there's Alex in the audience is contributing. There's a lot of people from Cogenus contributing. Johan Martson is contributing. We are trying to map different phases of product design to architectural phases as well, and see what is the overlap. So how can one help the other? But this is a topic probably for a few months later, because it's still a work in progress. But this is an attempt to make this intersection much bigger. There are a few videos from me and Bob doing some. We had a lot of fun doing them. And yeah, I'm way over time, so thank you. If you have questions, get me outside. Thank you.